70 years ago this week, Americans watched as the Red Scare went Hollywood. Here are 5 contemptible things about the Hollywood Blacklist. Number 1, it was an episode in an ongoing national witch hunt. The creation of the Hollywood Blacklist was one of the most famous events of the anti-communist hysteria that swept through the United States in the decade following World War II. But it was not the beginning. By the time the Blacklist was established, efforts to root out communist infiltrators had been picking up speed for months. In March of 1947, President Harry Truman signed an executive order mandating that all federal civil service employees be investigated to establish their loyalty to the United States. Evidence of disloyalty included, but was not limited to, membership in the Communist Party, or support or approval of communism. It was the start of what would be called the Second Red Scare, the first Red Scare having taken place in the years following the First World War, and it gave certain people in Hollywood an excuse to do something they'd been wanting to do for years. Number 2, it was the result of anti-communist paranoia in the movie industry. The federal government's commitment to rooting out communist influences paralleled anti-communist sentiment that had been percolating in Hollywood since the 1930s. Communists were blamed by some for labor strikes, and the fear of communist infiltration served to exacerbate tensions between industry unions like the Screenwriters Guild and the studios. In July 1946, William Wilkerson, founder of The Hollywood Reporter, began publishing the names of suspected communists and sympathizers within the motion picture industry. In October 1947, the House of Representatives Committee on Un-American Activities, or HUAC, subpoenaed over 36 Hollywood producers, directors, actors, and screenwriters to offer testimony as part of an investigation into communist infiltration of the American film industry. Most were called as friendly witnesses. They included Walt Disney, Gary Cooper, Ronald Reagan, and Ayn Rand. They told the committee that the communist threat was serious, and some, including Disney, named names. 11 witnesses were called as suspected communists. They were asked the now infamous question, "Are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?" Only one of the 11 answered the question, Bertolt Brecht, the German playwright, poet, and occasional screenwriter, who told the committee that he had never been a communist. The other 10 unfriendly witnesses refused to answer the committee's questions, declaring the investigation to be in violation of freedom of speech and the right to free assembly. It was a gutsy moral stand, and one that neither Congress nor Hollywood would support. Number 3, it cost dozens of people their livelihoods. The group of 10 that refused to cooperate with HUAC consisted of 7 writers, Alva Bessie, Lester Cole, John Howard Lawson, Albert Maltz, Ring Lardner Jr., Samuel Ornitz, and Dalton Trumbo, 2 directors, Herbert Biberman and Edward Dmytryk, and 1 producer, Adrian Scott. On November 24, 1947, the House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly to cite the Hollywood 10, as they were now called, for contempt of Congress. All 10 were eventually convicted of contempt and made to serve 1-year prison sentences. Their names were also the first ones on the blacklist. The day after Congress cited the Hollywood 10 for contempt, the president of the Motion Picture Association of America issued the Waldorf Statement, declaring that members of the Association of Motion Picture Producers, which was essentially the entire Hollywood establishment, would no longer employ the Hollywood 10 or anyone else who was a communist or a communist sympathizer. In the next few years, the blacklist grew to include, by some estimates, as many as 300 names. And it wasn't a passing fad. Number 4, it lasted for over a decade. A few of those on the blacklist were able to find work in independent productions or continue their careers outside the United States. Some blacklisted screenwriters were able to work occasionally under pseudonyms or without official credit. Carl Foreman was one such writer. His final credit before being blacklisted was as screenwriter of the western High Noon, which starred Gary Cooper, who had testified before HUAC, but didn't name names and eventually grew to be an opponent of the blacklist. Cooper played a retiring marshal who must face down a gang of outlaws alone when the rest of the townspeople are too cowardly to support him. The film was widely interpreted as an allegory of the Red Scare, with the marshal representing those on the blacklist who had been abandoned by the supposedly good people of Hollywood. High Noon won 4 Academy Awards in 1953, including Best Actor for Cooper, but the blacklist lasted another 7 years. It was finally broken in 1960 when director Otto Preminger hired Dalton Trumbo, one of the original Hollywood 10, to write the screenplay for Exodus. Later that year, Kirk Douglas pressured Universal Pictures to acknowledge that Trumbo had also been the screenwriter for Spartacus. The blacklist came to a more definitive end in 1962 when blacklisted radio host John Henry Falk won a lawsuit against the organization that had named him as a communist sympathizer. Even so, the repercussions of the blacklist were felt for decades to come. Number 5, it's part of Hollywood's legacy of dark, open secrets. Some of those who had been blacklisted continued to struggle to find work in the movie industry for years, and some of those who had cooperated with HUAC to avoid being blacklisted themselves struggled to live with what they had done. Sterling Hayden, the star of The Asphalt Jungle, who named names before the committee, was reportedly so guilt-ridden that he nearly drank himself to death. We will never know exactly how many people were on the Hollywood blacklist, because the blacklist never officially existed. Like the gentleman's agreement that barred black players from Major League Baseball for the first half of the 20th century, the blacklist was widely known, but rarely acknowledged explicitly. In that respect, it's a bit like the sexual abuse and harassment that has pervaded Hollywood for as long as anyone can remember. Another dark, open secret that is only now finally being brought to light because, just as was the case with the blacklist, a few people decided that enough was enough and did something about it. Just imagine how much pain, suffering, and ruination we could avoid if only we didn't insist on taking so damn long to do the right thing. The hardest part is picking only 5. Catch you next time. Hey folks, hope you got something out of this one. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks for watching.